Okay, so we are live, and hello everyone, and welcome to United We Stand. I'm your host Jim Feeney, and this show airs every week with 30 minutes of hopefully insightful commentary about the world around us and how we build a stronger, more sustainable America. You can find these podcasts at www.jimfeeney.com and subscribe to them at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and tons of other places. Today, my guest is once again retired Colonel Scott Caine, who's running for the Florida 8th Congressional seat. As a fighter pilot, Scott's fabulous military career included more than 3,400 flying hours and culminated with his final command as Vice Commander of the 9th Air Force, where he was in charge of more than 29,000 airmen and airwomen. Scott's a longtime resident of Vero Beach, Florida, with his wife Pam, and he's raised three great grown adult children. I had Scott on my show last month, where I met him for the first time, and since then I've been following his campaign, and have to say, folks, I'm very impressed. You know, impressed to the point where he has my vote, and I urge you all to vote for him as well. You can learn more at caineforcongress.com. That's C-A-I-N-E, caineforcongress.com. So while we're blessed with a pretty good representative in Bill Posey, I think it's time we have Scott's brand of proven leadership and his deep, along with his deep foreign policy and military knowledge, that I think is going to be invaluable as we meet the increasing challenge of a rising China. So it's great to have you here, Scott. Welcome back.
Well, Jim, thanks for having me back, and thanks for that rousing endorsement. It's been great to get to know you and to reacquaint with the community as we've gone through this campaign.
This is such an important election, both the election that you've got here in Florida, and nationally. There's so much at stake here, and as I sort of alluded to in my preamble, China is one of them that is at the top of the list. And I know for a lot of Americans, it might not be the most burning issue, and we have some other burning issues that we're going to talk about here too. But I want to leg right into China because it really is top of mind in the news these days. As you probably know, one of the most popular social media apps these days, especially for young folks, is TikTok, including my kids. My daughter loves TikTok, and I've told her many times this is just a spy device in China, and it's just, why are you using this? You put our entire family at risk. So now we have, for our listeners here, TikTok is a social app where it's just a lot of dancing and foolish stuff. It's interesting, but at the end of the day, it is affiliated with the Chinese government, despite what they say as a private company. And Microsoft and Twitter are now in talks to buy them, which was just a shot across the bow. So, and even my podcast, Scott, I got to tell you, I have listeners in China. When you look at the analytics of we have a rapidly growing audience, but I'm amazed at how global it's become. But who the heck is listening to my podcast in China? I know it can't be the normal folks because I have strong opinions on China, and they're not going to let any of their citizens listen to that. So give me your thoughts about how this is going to affect America and how we should combat this challenge with China, especially around TikTok and their digital platforms.
Well, Jim, actually the silver lining, I think, of the COVID-19 experience is that a lot of folks have had their eyes open to China. For the most part, for the past 40 years, it's just been an economic engine that has been, facilitating growth there and here. And, everybody's taken a blind eye to what goes on in China. However, because of COVID-19, we've had folks actually, talking about the kind of environment that China provides. And what that is it's the opposite of the United States experience. It's an unfree country. It's run by a single party communist regime, and they more or less tell people what to do and how to act. And if you don't like it, then you're tough because we'll put you in prison. So TikTok it's an interesting example of something that is insidious. So, like when you first look at TikTok, it's a kind of foolishness that, people enjoy. It seems pretty, harmless.
Yeah.
Nothing to it, right? And but then when you start looking a little deeper, you find out this is the kind of thing the Chinese Communist Party does to gain foothold and to get advantage across the globe. So what is this TikTok thing? Well, the algorithms inside it more or less read your mind. It's not like to just say, okay, we're going to find what sites you like to go to. They look at your facial recognition. They look at your geographic location. They look at the kinds of people you talk to, the things you enjoy. They read your mind to know you. And so they have that data available to them inside of their app. And ByteDance, is a private company, theoretically a private company in China. But there's no such thing as a real private company in China, because if you're a big company, then there's a board member that's a Chinese Communist Party person that ensures that you follow the party policies and that you stay in line. And oh, by the way, the second half of that, which is even more important than that aspect, is that in 2017, they passed a national intelligence law that requires every citizen and or organization in China to participate in intelligence gathering if required or asked by the government. What does that mean to us? Well, if ByteDance has all the data that they want on us as human beings in the United States of America, and the Chinese Communist Party wants that information, guess what?
They're going to get it.
So it is an arm of the government, and it is they are looking straight into your house with that very cute little app that everybody thinks is a lot of fun. So I think the president was spot on to say we're going to ban it unless some American company buys it and brings it to the United States.
That's just unbelievable. I mean, George Orwell and Aldous Huxley were correct. It's here. It's on our doorstep now. It's both external and it's internal. So it just really should give everybody in the United States, all citizens of the United States that care about freedom, pause when they look at any of these social platforms and how much control they wield, whether it's from China or it's internally. But so staying on the topic of China, they have grown economically, really, because the United States let them into the World Trade Organization back in the Clinton administration, and for all good reasons. The idea being, if China can join the world community economically, eventually that communist regime will fall. It'll just not be useful anymore. People will recognize the value of freedom, and so on. That didn't happen. But yet we built strategic supply chain. This is, our vitamins and our medications are manufactured in China and shipped back to us. With rising tensions like we have on the military end, on the cyber warfare end, what are we going to do about the supply chain? Give us an example of the kind of legislation you'd support if you were elected to help the United States retool its supply chain.
Well, first of all, you point out a very important point, is that almost everything strategic that we need in our country is produced to some degree or to a large degree in China. So it is a big problem we need to face, and we need to get it under control. So what kind of legislation? Well, we need to incentivize American companies to companies to bring back manufacturing to the United States of America. And be honest with you, I'm okay if we suffer a little bit of hardship in the process, but this has been a long, insidious process once again that occurred over about 40-year period. When Deng Xiaoping opened up, China to allow that trade to occur, he did it in a very calculated way. The Chinese are not fools. They have 5,000, 6,000 years of history, and they understand their place in the world. And I tell people all the time that, they have 5,000 years of strong history as leaders on the world stage, maybe not reaching out across the world, but they were leaders in many ways. And they were interrupted with a century of humiliation where they were overcome by empires, right? And so when they came out of the Second World War, their goal was to get back to where they belonged in their minds, is to be on top. So this has been a very calculated thing on their part since Deng Xiaoping took power in '78. And we gained a lot out of this because the economic engine was fantastic, and we see some of that prosperity that they see as well. The problem is we haven't put barriers in place to slow it down once it got to a reasonable point. And so it's well past reasonable at this point, and they have a lot of advantage. So we have to incentivize bringing things back. and we have to hold firm on those kind of trade deals that are not in our favor whatsoever. So those are the two aspects I think that we really need to work hard on. And what I said, a couple weeks ago is that, we need to hold firm for freedom, and we have to have patience. The Chinese people will have exceptional patience. They have a very long view of time and history. The United States, we could barely see tomorrow, never mind 100 years in the future. So we have to start executing some patience here.
So that's a great, great point. I mean, we're an open society. I think we've proven to the world that there's no system better than the American free market system that we sort of inherited from the British as well. But and no civilization has done more to raise the living standards of the average Joe than us. But a free society comes with some liability. And I think you hit the nail on the head. We're not patient people. I mean, just look at our capital markets. We force our public companies to jump through hoops every quarter. I'm not sure how value added that is. So how do we? That's such an important message, Scott, and I'm glad you brought it up. And it's important, I think, that our leaders, which I hope and I'm confident you're going to be one here shortly, emphasize to our citizens: hey, take a step back, learn to be patient. And here are because our adversaries are patient, and patience is a virtue. Here's what comes with patience, and instead of what we're kind of fed in the media that that chasing shiny objects all day long online. That's great. I want to pivot just a little bit from China because and get to some domestic issues, especially another thing that's very top of mind is which it is for me. I have a daughter that's about to start her junior year. And we're not sure what kind of school she's going to have. I'm up here in Massachusetts, and I'm talking to all of my friends in Mass. I mean, talk about the tale of two states, Massachusetts and Florida, very different. And I spent a lot of time talking to friends of mine that are teachers, business people, just average parents, and across the aisle. This is a bipartisan issue. Our kids need to go back to school because the damage that the COVID shutdown is causing our society is epic. There's not a cost benefit analysis to me that's being done here. And so I hear this anger from parents, again, from both sides of the aisle. What the hell am I paying my taxes for? Or what am I paying this expensive tuition for if it's all going to be online? And because that's not how you teach kids. Where are the leaders screaming this at the top of their lungs?
No, as I talk to voters out there, that's a very important point that I think is hidden behind all the rhetoric coming out of Washington, D.C., is that the American people actually want their economy back. They want to send their children back to school. They want to go back to as normal a life as they can have. And I think the center of that is sending our kids back to school, because there's so much that drives our daily lives. If you have children at home, those children drive pretty much everything you do. You work for those children, you produce for those children. If you ferry them back and forth to different activities, your dreams for their future are what you're living for as a parent. And when we put that on hold, it's one thing to put it on hold for a few months and say, okay, let's take a pause and see what we need to do. But when we're talking about, okay, we're thinking about another year of a pause, there are not too many years in our lives to be able to take a year off just to see how things are going to play out. Our kids are too important. Their education, their future is too important. So I think we need to get them back to school, and I think we need to do it rapidly. Obviously there's implications for folks that are at risk, so we need to take those into account. But once again, our kids are pretty resilient, and we're a country that was built off of risk, and that's what I think we've forgotten in this.
Yeah.
That the country was a country of people that took a huge leap,
massive,
to set up this country. You go back to people getting on a boat to go across a great ocean.
Oh, little toy boats by today's standards, and we're going to go to the new world. I mean, how about that risk?
Yeah, and let's settle the West. Let's get in a wagon train and go, through lands that we don't know about, over mountains. The country is all about taking risk to try to have something better for our families and our future. And right now we're almost afraid of our shadows. And I think that we need to get back to, we are a resilient people. We are a very successful people, and we are self-sufficient. And so let's do that for ourselves, and get our kids back to school. I think it's a huge issue, and we need to do that.
It's a massive issue. And I mean, on that topic, I'm going to probably, break the unspoken, politically correct version of not a white guy talking about Black Lives Matter, because that is also a top of mind issue in this country. It emerges as a very powerful political group that supports the Democratic Party, and it has a very unique focus on what it perceives as systemic racism. I think reasonable people can disagree with some of the premise and their methods, but they're out there and they're advocating for what they think is important. But the one thing that's important, and as a fact, is they support the Democratic Party. And when you support the Democrat Party, this incarnation of the Democratic Party, that means you're supporting a broken public school system. You're supporting the status quo, which includes teachers' unions. I mean, I had this conversation at my son's graduation party a few days ago with one of my cousins who's a public school teacher. And I asked her, I said, hey, what are the parents think? Are they demanding to go back to school? He goes, oh yeah, everyone is. It's like, well, we have to do it safely, of course, but who chooses whether we do this? Is the teachers union get involved in that? She says, oh yes. So, legging back to Black Lives Matter, I know Black citizens in this country, both the ones that I'm friendly with and ones that I've heard and see, they want the same best for their kids. They have all the same hopes and dreams that we do. And it seems like increasingly our public schools don't do that, and they leave them behind, especially in disadvantaged communities. So it's worth reminding listeners that Ron DeSantis beat Andrew Gillum in 2018 in the Florida gubernatorial election, really because after looking at the data, there are about 100,000 Black moms that voted for Ron DeSantis and not Andrew Gillum, precisely because they wanted access to more charter schools to forge a better life for their kids. Where do you see this? I mean, this is education. Education is one of my great passions. It's the Marshall Plan of our time. We fix so much in America when we fix education, and we can't have like this two-tiered education system that people seem to tolerate in this country.
Well, Jim, first of all, you're spot on with the youth of America is the future of America. And so we really need to take care of the youth of America. Our kids need a good education, top to bottom. Every one of them needs to be able to look to the future with pride and with hope. And education is a great way to do it. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why I'm running for office, is because I think we need people to reach out to young Americans and talk to them about the greatness of our country, and talk about freedom and liberty and what our country can do under a capitalist free enterprise system and not under a socialist system. But so how do you get to those kids? Certainly, right. You have to have a good education system. And personal opinion is I would love for our schools and our neighborhoods to be all of the high quality that we don't have to bus any kid to any school anytime. Mm-hmm. That would be the utopian world that I would hope we would live in.
Neighborhood schools like we grew up with.
Exactly right.
The kids can walk to their school.
Exactly right. And then parents could be involved in the school that's next door, not the one that they have to drive halfway across the town to get to. That is the perfect solution in my mind. But short of that, where we are now, we don't have that. And so we need to give parents and families the opportunities to find the best educational opportunity for their kids that's available. And things like charter schools are everything is on the table in my view.
It's competition. It makes us all better, right?
Exactly right. So if we're not going to ensure that we have a great neighborhood school for all the kids to go to, then let's put competition into the equation, and let's use part of what America is. It's a free enterprise competition system to ensure that the schools are better. And you mentioned the teachers unions. It drives me nuts because there's a place for unions in society.
Certainly, yep.
But it shouldn't be being counter to what the citizens of the country are wanting for their kids.
Yeah.
So the union becomes more powerful than the parents.
The adults are more important than the kids, because
Exactly
the
right.
kids aren't their customers. They're union members of their customers. And I get that. When you have a company, you have an organization, you work on behalf of your constituents. But how perverse is that? The constituents aren't the children. It just doesn't make sense. Franklin Roosevelt, of all people, warned us against public sector unions and the damage they can cause. And here we are. This is coming from, a guy that was raised by a career teacher, public school teacher. My dad, he was a negotiator for the teachers union growing up. And, over time, he sort of pivoted and said, this isn't right, because he was a true teacher. He said, I'm advocating for stuff that I know is not going to be good for my classroom. So these are not politically correct sort of topics to talk about, especially for someone like me who's wants to be a middle grounder, seeking middle ground with others. But we have to recognize the elephant in the room here, and if we're going to really fix public education. So we live in Florida. We live on the Space Coast. Scott's from Vero Beach, as is am I. I'm my adopted hometown now in Florida, and this past year, President Trump has founded a new military program called Space Force, and we are luckily our Florida Space Coast is should be right in the middle of that, and especially when you talk about China and our adversaries sort of militarizing space, we need to be there as a strong America. How, as a leader in Washington, are you going to ensure that our Space Coast becomes the hub of this new military force?
Well, let's go back to the 1960s when, I recall as a little kid, building Saturn V rockets and thinking about, going to the moon and watching the lunar lander on the moon. And when I thought about space, I thought about Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, that's what space was to me.
Sure.
And so I think that most Americans can put a tie between the space coast and space. And so it's a natural fit, isn't it?
Sure.
So we should be very involved in what goes on with that new Space Force. I've been a big advocate for a Space Force since I was at the School of Advanced Air and Space Studies back in 2002. And, I actually fought with a lot of my contemporaries because, they talk about the economics of how do you create a new force. It's always more expensive. But I hearken back to 1947 when the United States Air Force was set up. And when you break a force away from the parent organization, what you do is you allow leadership that's experts in the field to now be leading and thinking forward. So, I've been a big advocate of creating a Space Force for a long time because I think we will gain more than we will lose as a country. Now, how do we ensure that we capitalize on that and are part of that equation here in the Space Coast? Well, first of all, the Space Force will live in the Pentagon like all the other military, forces. Air Force is, everybody's got their place in the E-ring of the Pentagon.
Right.
With that said, though, there's a Space Command that's been revitalized, and I think a natural home for that, or at least a big component of that, is right here in our Space Coast. And I'll tell you that we need a legislative representative that is going to talk about that and talk about it loudly. I'm kind of a little disappointed because Mike Waltz is the guy that usually is interviewed or talks about a Space Coast, Space Command, whenever that subject comes up, and frankly, he's not our representative. And so I'd like to take his position as the guy that's championing the space program, the Space Coast, the Space Force, all right here in the Space Coast District 8. So that's what I'll do for us.
It's great. I mean, it just adds to the tremendous assets that Florida has. We've got just boatloads of people moving in from some of these northeastern states, these high tax states, bringing their brains, their money, their excitement, all the things that you need, the raw materials that you need for building a strong economy. And the military is an enumerated power in our Constitution, unlike most of what government does these days. It's way out of bounds constitutionally. But the military is, on paper, it's what we're supposed, it's one of the common goods. So we need to do that the best. And so I think about, a Space Coast could have sort of the same sort of uplift that Silicon Valley did out west. I mean, I spent some time there. I'm a technology guy, and I see how the co-location of some strategic assets becomes a planet around which satellites can orbit and build. And that really is on the table here for the Space Coast. You think of all the technology folks, the smart folks. We have SpaceX there now, and just upgrading that whole Cocoa Beach area, from a real estate perspective, bringing opportunity where it hasn't been in a while in a scalable way. I mean, is that sort of what you see as the possibility for our Space Coast?
Oh, absolutely. And, I was on CBS News both when they launched the SpaceX and when they splashed down, talking about that. And here's what I really love about this is that for us to move forward very rapidly, what we have to do is we have to capitalize on the innovative effort of the free market system. The government does non-governmental or governmental things very well, but not non-governmental things.
Right.
And so when we start partnering between the government and private enterprise, that's when that exponential growth occurs. So SpaceX is a perfect example of how that's going to happen. And, so that's like the seed. We've kind of planted the seed now, and now let's take advantage of that. Let's do other things in the local area that take advantage of the free market enterprise and to fuel the space program from right here.
Mm-hmm.
And since we've got that seed started with the space launches, it's a very natural fit to continue that and to move forward in that manner.
Yeah, no, for sure. I just look at the possibilities are just endless, and I'm really excited about what can happen there, as I've watched it happen in other places.
Mhm.
We've got about 5 minutes left here, and I want to leg into another very important thing that's probably not top of mind with most voters, but I think it's got to be part of the conversation for anybody that we elect in public office, and that's term limits. This is an area where you seem to differ from Congressman Posey, who, by the way, is a terrific guy, and he's done a very good job. I think we're blessed to have two amazing choices for the Florida 8th District, but this is an area where you differ. And when I want to go back to our first conversation last month, and you were explaining how, as a military leader and the military generally, you're always training your replacement because you've got a baked in 2 to 3 year tour and you're going to be gone. So you've got to accomplish the mission, and then you've got to make sure that you leave it better than you found it with great leadership. And that is just a brilliant way to scale and ensure continuity. And a term limit sort of defeats that. People that are in office want to stay in office because, heck, it's lucrative. Yes, it's
Right.
public service, but it's also an amazing way to make a boatload of money. And we see example after example of that. So where do you fall on term limits? I know that you are for term limits, but how important is that? Help our listeners and the citizens to understand why this is so fundamentally important to our nation.
Well, Jim, as you've articulated, I am a big fan of term limits, and it really goes back to that the time in the military. The first thing I'll say is that the argument against term limits is that, well, you need a lot of seniority in order to get things accomplished in our
Right.
Congress, and so
Some truth to that.
There's truth to that. Here's my argument to that is that the stronger you are as a leader, the less you need seniority to take a leadership role.
Right.
And so I'll look at both sides of the aisle. We'll look at AOC, which is completely on the other side from me on almost every issue.
Yep.
But as a freshman congressman, she is leading. Where there's
She
no
is.
doubt.
She's done a really good job leading her party. She's provided a big vision. I agree.
Absolutely. So you can certainly do strong, bold things as a freshman. Another guy on our side of the aisle that I'll look at is Trey Gowdy. Most people know who Trey Gowdy is. They really respect him because he was an articulate, smart, constitutional representative from South Carolina. And if you were to think about how long he was in Congress, you would probably think, well, he was there a pretty long time. He was there for 4 terms. Mm-hmm. So after his first term, he was the chairman of the Benghazi hearings. So here's a guy that was a very young congressman that was leading a very important set of hearings. And then he became a leader in the House of Representatives. So with very few years under his belt, he was doing what we want. And so that demonstrates exactly what I'm talking about. When you build people as strong leaders, then they exercise leadership, and then they hand over the reins to somebody else they've built leadership underneath them. And so what our military does so spectacularly is that we deliberately create leaders. And if you're always in the role of looking for people around you, if you're a more senior member of Congress and you're looking for the younger members of Congress that you think that really can exercise a great leadership role in
Pull
Congress,
them up, pull them forward.
Deliberately pull them up. And, and then you're going to step aside when it's their turn, as opposed to just continuing to hang on forever. And the other thing that this does is that it doesn't skip generations of leaders. The longer somebody hangs on, if somebody's in Congress for 30 years, that means that at least one or two generations of people didn't get an opportunity to lead.
Great point. What a fabulous point.
New ideas into Congress. And I'll say Bill Posey said this when he was a co-sponsor for the amendment to bring term limits to Congress. He said, we need fresh faces and fresh ideas in Congress. That was in 2010. Mm-hmm. And I agree with him completely. And I think what he's done is he's forgotten that along the way. And he's gotten, and what the other final point is that the longer you're there, and I've talked to several congressmen have told me, the longer you're there, the more you get kind of pulled into the system, and the power kind of gets, overcomes you a little bit. And you almost start to seeing yourself as more important than
intoxicating power.
Job. It is an intoxicating thing. And I saw that even in the military, that it is very easy to start reading your press clippings and think you're a really important person. I'll tell you, Jim, I want to do this because I believe the job requires, the right kind of person. And I've got some of those blessed skills that you, the taxpayer, helped give me. And I just want to give those back. But I do know that it's a finite amount of time, and then it's time for me to push aside and let somebody else, the next generation of leaders, take hold.
Well, speaking for myself and lots of other folks I know in Vero Beach, we really hope you get the chance to be pulled forward as one of those freshman leaders, because you're spot on. You see the problems. You have experience at large scale and leading. And all of you listening to United We Stand here, I urge you to get out and vote for Scott Caine, CaineForCongress.com, CAINE. Scott, it's a pleasure to have you again today. This is tremendous, and I always learn something when I talk with you here.
Well, Jim, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show one more time. If you don't mind, if we have just one more minute.
Sure, go ahead.
Give kind of a final pitch to the people out there that what I would like to do is, as of today, I'm issuing what I call a flight plan for relaunching the American economy. And so on my website will be that flight plan. And it talks about all the principles, a lot of the principles we talked about today, how I think we need to reignite American patriotism. We need to, stem the tide of socialism, keep China at bay. We need to get our kids back to school. We need our economy to go again. And if we do those kind of things, then our great country will continue to move forward. If we just sit idly by, this is a tough time. There are some tough issues out there, but
certainly
we can't just sit idly by. And so I offer up that on my website, and I'd love for people to go check it out. It's the flight plan for relaunching America's economy.
Awesome. Great to have you here, Scott. And everybody, go out and vote, please. And remember, that's our show for today, folks, but united we stand, divided we fall, each one of us for the other, and all for all. Thanks much. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Jim.